So I'm going to go here at the top left to where preferences is, and I'm going to click that. And let me know when you have this window open. Okay, so you're going to be on add-ons, and top right, this little eyeglass thing, you're going to type node, and it's going to pull up this node wrangler. And you're going to want to click the little check mark. That's the only thing we need right now. Okay, awesome. So no wrangler, because I'm going to go over this real quick, is so we have our little box right here. No wrangler is really important when we go to shading. Because once we get further along in like at least the basics, because I'm thinking of doing two different things. I'm thinking of like doing something very simple, like just showing you kind of like the basics of setting stuff up for like a small object, and then go something a little bit more complex. But it should be easy. It'll be just more like a kind of give you ideas to how to work in the program, which you kind of get like just the very bare basics down. So no wrangler will help me do this. Like if I wanted to click this guy right here and hit Control T, now I just saved myself a bunch of time having to hunt down these three items. Eventually, when we make something, we're going to add a texture. And then for this, like, two right here, it'll help us move the texture around. If we want it's like a certain, like, piece to appear in a specific location. So, and I will also send you my page of notes, because I have, like, a bunch of shortcuts written down. And that's one thing you should do when you're like learning Blender, at least, is like you go like, okay, this shortcut, I'll just write this down, because if you don't work in the program a lot, sometimes you can forget shortcuts, which is really annoying when you're trying to like do things. And so what I like to do is I'll like, okay, how do I do this? And I'll go onto YouTube and I'll pull up a video. And it's like, okay, this person showed me this, how to do this. I'll save that video. And I'll try to do that a bunch of times by myself. And if there's like something specific in that video I cannot remember, I write a note down to myself. Because like, I'll give an example. Making a pillow. I mean, it shouldn't be too hard to make a pillow, but sometimes it is. Because you're like, okay, I need to take this thing and squish it down. And then I need to hit these other things. So I keep that video saved because I forget every single time how to make a pillow. Even though it's really easy. So I'm going to go back out to layout. We're going to leave shading. Go to layout. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to just do left click and we're going to drag and delete all these. We're going to start fresh. Because a lot of times you're going to probably do this because you're going to want to make changes on yourself and you don't want to like fiddle with what's already there. So let me know when you've done that. Okay, so the next thing we do, we're going to hit Shift A. Shift A. No, bring up this window. And this is a shortcut for adding in geometry into our little environment we're working in. There is up here, up top, a version of that. If you didn't want to like type into here, you can go up here and do that. It's all up here. But I'm going to do Shift A, and then we're going to add in another cube. We deleted our previous cube, but we're going to add another cube. And then you probably see down here I have like all my keystrokes will appear right here. Hopefully it's big enough. If not, I'll talk through whatever I'm doing. So the next thing we're going to do, still having that highlighted, is we're going to go down to the Add Cube. And this will basically let us adjust the size, adjust the overall size of this existing cube. We can adjust like its location, its rotation, and I'll show you how to like squish and squash this guy in a second. But we're gonna just leave, let's make it 2. Yeah, 2. Why did I hit 4? I said 2. Okay. Then we'll click off him. Then we'll click on him again. And next thing we're gonna do is there's 2 ways to go about this. We can either go up here. If you see the little blue, red, green little UCS thing, right next to that is like a little tiny arrow. You click that. And this is another like, oh, let me know when you do that, just in case you need me to go back. Oh, yeah, you're fine. Okay, you just go up here and you just like move it a little bit. Because what you did, you probably did this. You can just go up there, go boop, there you go. Because this right here lets you like orbit around your object. And if you're like, oh no, where do I start? Z or X? You just go Z, and then you can go. Okay. So like right next to that little UCS is a little arrow, and click that, and it'll pull out this toolbar. So for here, I'll click on the little cube, and I'll go like, okay, I want to make this flat. So I know Z is up and down, so I'm going to do this, and I'm going to go to dimensions, and I'm going to go to Z, I'm going to hit 1, and then enter. And now that boy is flatter. There is another way to do this, so let me know when you first did that. That boy, okay. So now I'm going to do this, I'm going to click him, I'm going to press S. And then, because S is scale, now that I hit S, I'm going to hit Z. And Z will let me control that location as well. And still having this click, you can hit X or Y. So this is if you're kind of fishing for a dimension. You're like, okay, I'm going to drag these locations and see what I like. And then once you've done that, you can either go like, okay, I don't particularly like how this looks stretched out. I'm going to do escape. Resets it for you. But I feel like this one right here is still a little too big for what I want to like show you. So we're going to go back up here. We're going to hit 0.5. Perfect. So the next thing we're going to do, as at the top left of the screen, there's a text right here that says object mode. We are going to go into edit mode. And right now, in edit mode, we can adjust this object to a bit better. We can change how it looks. We can add in more lines. So when we do further changes, we can be a bit more precise. So, but the one thing I want to do right now with this one is I'm not super familiar with all the shortcuts, so I'm just going to go to the icons. So we're going to go down here to loop cut. And then with loop cut, this will basically add, it's called subdivide, so it'll break up our like simple object, which is just a cube, into a more complex object. Which, with our next step, will be a bit obvious why we're doing this. So I want to do one loop cut here, and then I want to do one loop cut here. And usually these will always go for the center of whatever object you're doing this on. So the other thing I'm going to show you, which if you are, what's what I'm looking for? Like that, like small cat I had in that little like render we were doing the collab for. What I did to make that was I just did boxes, which is this just a tool right here where you can just have like a box that you just keep on making over and over and over. I'm just showing this off because it's actually pretty interesting. So I just made all these boxes, not having to do Shift A to place all these. This is good if you are thinking up like a bigger idea and you want to iterate, like just test something out real quick. I'm not going to keep this here. I'm just showing it to you because it's really helpful. It's like something you don't need that's precise, but you just want something there because you're like, okay, I want to have like just a box here to kind of like fill in this little area. And you're like, I'll come back to it later to change it. So the next thing, I'll also show you this because it's related to loop cut, but this one is called knife. And this one is light loop cut, but less precise. You can basically draw a shape, hit enter into here. So if you, let's say, for like, okay, I want to have, you're doing like a face. You're like, okay, I want to cut out the nose, but doing the loop cut will just look kind of weird. So I'm going to just draw like a half triangle. And this will be a good tool for doing that. We're going to go back up to here and we're going to click select box. So we don't accidentally, when we're in edit again, accidentally click something and have to control Z our way out of it. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go up to here. We'll go back to object mode. What we're going to do is we're going to move to the right side of the screen. This is where a lot of different like features and icons are located. And I'm going to go over to modifiers. A modifier is sort of like a changing of state of the object. So we're going to have this boy selected. And then we're going to go to add modifier. And then we're going to go to here. And then we're going to click on the subdivide surface. So what subdivide surface is it takes your object and kind of like gives it more, kind of like when you see like a car. If you were to make a car in this program, you would have subdivide surface on so it wouldn't look blocky and like I guess like the Tesla truck. It wouldn't look like a 90s video game car. So for here, now I'm going to show you this. Okay, so for here, this one's levels viewport. So this is what's going to be shown in here. And then render is what's going to be output. So right now we're seeing level 1. If we click it up, now we see level 2. What you need to be careful with this is if you use it on complex objects, or if you just decide, okay, I'm going to see what it looks at 5 and then hit show me in viewport, because this will tank your system pretty hard. Because just before you like messaged me, I was like setting up a scene for like a cover, and I made a well. And I went, okay, instead of just building this in parts, I'm just going to make the well and then I'm going to subdivide it. Not a good idea. Because it didn't crash Blender, but Blender took a long time to kind of like math that out. When you are building a more complex object, you want to kind of build it in parts and subdivide those individual parts. Sometimes you can't because it'll look weird, and you have to kind of decide if you're going to tank the hit or you're just going to have it look a little weird. So for this, I'm going to drop it back to level 1 for us. And I'm like, okay, this isn't exactly what I want, or like, because I want us to make a tile. Just something simple, just to kind of like show the program. I don't really like how this looks. This looks a bit too like a button. So what the next thing we're going to do, we're going to go back to edit, the top left. And the cool thing is, it shows you a preview of what the subdivide looks like and what your original object looks like. So we're going to go back over to loop cut. And the shortcut for loop cut is Control R, but I'm just going to click on it. Just be simple. So I'm like, okay, this is a bit not flat enough. So I'm going to do is next I'm going to go to here, and I'm going to do a loop cut this way through the center. So it's like a cross shape. And then we're like, okay, that's a little bit better. Next we're going to do is we're going to do a loop cut to the right, loop cut to the left, and then same thing on the other side, loop cut to the right, loop cut to the right, the left. Oh my god. Flip it. I was saying which sides was which, and I got it wrong. So it's like, okay, this is a little bit better, but now it's still a bit too big. It's not flat enough to be a good tile. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to edit object mode. Edit, oh my god. Exit edit mode. We're going to head to object mode. And we're going to go like, okay, this boy is like not flat enough. So we're going to drop. the Z a bit more. 2.5. Oh, that's a lot better. That's a lot better. We're gonna go back edit mode. We're gonna go over here to the very top right, and we're gonna hit X. So we're looking at it dead on. So the next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna go back to select box, top left. And the next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna go to the very, very, very top right, up here. And I'm gonna explain this window a little bit. So for up here, this right here is an X-ray. So if we are to select these boys, every other one that's within this view gets selected. So I'm going to turn this for you. That we had those bombs selected, now we get to select all the other ones. If we did not do this in X-ray, if I try to do this not in X-ray and I just did this, it's going to get these guys. That can't help me. I can't do much with that. So with X-ray on, go back to X, grab all these boys right here, back here, and then we're just going to do G, which G is the move tool for here. It's basically like grab, G, and then we're going to hit Z, and we're going to pull this boy up. Let me see. So you can pull them up as much as you feel like. So I think this looks good right here. Toggle off X-ray so I can see. Yeah, it's a lot flatter. So about like this distance right here would probably be good. The next thing we're gonna do, exit edit mode. We're in object mode again. We're gonna scroll out a little bit. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a light. So whenever you add something in, wherever this little guy, this cursor is, it will drop whatever you want onto that. So you need to realize that if you're working on like a big object, it's right there, and you make something, you're like, where'd it go? It's right there. You can find it up here. So if you're ever like, where is something? It's right in here. Your little layers menu, which we can customize this a bit more later on to help you. When you get to bigger projects, you can sometimes accidentally click things that you don't want to click, and having those locked is very helpful. So I'm going to do Shift A, and then we're going to go down, 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 and we're going to put a spotlight down. Actually, no. Spot, I think. Yeah, no, we'll do area. We'll do area. Sorry. I was trying to figure out which one looked best when we're doing this. So we're going to do an area. Okay, we'll do G and then Z. And we're going to pull that boy up. You can pull as far as you need, if you want, because we're going to make some adjustments. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to go back to the right side of the screen where all these icons are. And with this boy selected, you have a new icon, which is like a little light bulb right here. This little guy will allow us to adjust this guy. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to go back to the very top of the screen. Up here, next to X-ray, I want you to click this icon right here. It's right above options. This is our shading. So when you're working in Blender, you have these different like states you can have your object in. The least taxing on your system is this one. It's very flat. Not as much data is being portrayed in the window, so it's easier for you to work in. But this one is how we're gonna figure out how strong we need to have this light be for it to like illuminate our tile. So right now, 10 doesn't do anything for us. So I'm going to go like, okay, let's do 500. Okay, that is too bright. 500 is too bright, and it just blows out everything. So I'm like, okay, 250. Okay, that's a bit better. Still a bit too bright. So let's do 100. That's fine. So right here is we can change the shape and the size of whatever light is being projected down. So right now it's a square. And let's do ellipses. Why not? And we'll go, let's see, what do we want the size of ellipse? Let's do a 2 and a 2. Now it's more like a halo above our little tile. Is, if you see this little ball right here, with this little ball, we don't have to do it right now, you can change the degrees at which this is hitting your tile. So I'll demonstrate. So if I put it like here, whoop, it's not like an angle. You can't really you don't get like a great idea for this because we just have like one object. So if I had it like this, aha, only half of it's getting illuminated, and everything else is over here is getting illuminated. So I'll just go back to just having it face down. Okay. With the light down, the next thing we're gonna do, Shift A, we're adding the camera. The camera is very important because that determines what is being rendered. So I'm gonna do Shift A, camera, and our camera is going to be dropped in the center. So the camera should still be selected. If it's not selected, you can go up to here and click on the camera to select it. So we're going to go G, just hit Y. So I was like, oh, which way is X going? Like, okay. So, okay. We have our camera created. But sadly, our camera is facing the wrong direction, which is something you'll have to adjust. So what we're going to do now is, with this guy selected, we're going to go over to the right side of the screen, and there should be orange box. This says object. This right here will allow us to control the degrees, the rotation, and its location. Go to rotation. We're going to go 0 on X, 0 on Y, 0 on Z, just to like remove everything from it so we can start fresh. Okay, so once you have those at 0, we're gonna go to X, hit 90. Just put in 90 for X. So next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna go up here to the UCS, and right below that you see a little camera. We're gonna click on that camera. We're in the view that is going to be rendered. So we're like, okay, I don't like how this camera looks, but we have a way to deal with that. So we're going to hit G, and we're going to hit Z. And now I'm going to pull the camera up right there. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get out of that. You can either just hit middle scroll and just move out of it, or you can hit the camera icon again to get out of it. We're going to go back over here to the right side, and we're going to go to this red and black ball that says material, and click on it. So right here, our object currently has no materials assigned to it. We're like, okay, this has no materials assigned to it. What are we going to do? So we're going to do this. We're going to do add new material. And we're going to name it. Let's name it tile. Right now it's not super important because we're doing something basic, but like you can get into granular detail of how the object's going to appear with this material. But we're going to move on to something else that's going to be a bit more helpful. Just shading. Going to have this boy selected, and we're going to hit Control T. So we've created the image texture for this boy. So right now, he's just blank. He has nothing tied to him at all with the image texture. So the next thing we're going to do, shading to UV editing. When you look at this guy, so it's shading, UV editing. We're going to hit A in this window to select everything. So right now, you look at this boy and he's like, oh, that's so nice. Yay. He's just a box. It's very simple, not too complex. Sometimes get into more complex shapes. I won't go into it now. You have to kind of break down your object a bit more. So when you want to do specific shading, coloring, when you pull it out, it's easier for you to follow along. I'm still not that great at like texturing UVs that are complex. I need to like do a bit more like research and like study that to get better at it. But like teaching like the basic stuff isn't too hard. So like if this boy, don't do this, was like, oh, let's say his like texture was messed up. His like vert was like Z, oh sorry, G, like all the way over here. Like, oh shit. You'd have to go pull him back. Sometimes when you work with a more complex object, your verts, which are these little points, get really fucked up. And you have to kind of pull them apart. But a lot of that has to do with like just being new and just sometimes not knowing that, hey, maybe I shouldn't overlap certain surfaces. We're going to go to the top. There's going to be a new right here at the very top. We're going to hit new. And we're going to have an image that we can make. So we have this new image. We're going to call it tile. We're going to go, okay, this is tile. Another thing you can do is if you wanted, you can go to open. And then you could bring in an image that you wanted to add into here. But we're just going to stick with tile. And the next step, because even I forget this sometimes, we're going to go back to shading. We're like, okay, we've made the image for tile. How we're going to add that in? Right here. We're going to go right to image texture, and right here, in this little sun mountain in a picture, we're going to go to tile. And tile's loading right here. The next step, it's a process, going back up to shading, right next to it, we're going to texture paint. From shading to texture paint. There's about 2 different ways to do this. So right now, I could either paint directly on this, right here, or I can go into here, go to Z, and paint directly on him. So I'll show you. So let's go, I'm not on my tablet, so I just go like this. I'm going to paint him white right here. And you see, all these are painted white. Sometimes the UV can be very fucky. And you'd be like, okay, why is this right here being colored when I just want to do this? It's because of this line, this like right here. This little extra subsurface we put in to kind of give it like a curve has now been placed right here. There is other programs that are actually really good at doing like texture painting better than Blender, as far as I know, but I've seen like a lot of people do really good things in Blender. I'm not that great at texture painting in Blender, just because I like haven't access to my favorite brushes. So what I usually do is I roughly kind of color in what I want something to look like, and then I'll pull it out and I'll like do something nice in another program. There's still like some questions I probably can look up. It's like, okay, what if I just want to export this boy right here with the lines showing me where it is? I don't know how to do that. You just get blank. Like if I just colored this and the rest was black, that's what it looked like. It would just look white and black. It won't show me all these lines. So like that's some things like I'm just like, I have to look up myself. Yeah. There is actually, I don't know if I can show it to you right now. There is an extension called Primbus, which is you can buy on itch.io, which it takes Asprite and basically makes it so like, okay, I could bring this into here and do like pixel art, and it will show up as I'm working in here. And it's actually pretty cool. But it takes like a minute for me to remember how to do it because I don't do it super often. So let me see. No. Another time. Another time. I just want to do like some basic stuff. So we're gonna color this tile. That's what we're gonna do first. So if you want, you can do like a mossy sort of tile, or like a brown or a red tile. I'm gonna do kind of like a yellowish tile. Yeah, you could do that. So I'm just gonna kind of. So if you hit middle scroll, that's an easy way to kind of like grab and move this. So you can almost like you're spray painting the tile. But sometimes like, okay, I believe I've colored this tile properly. Oh no, I didn't. But sometimes this will happen where it's like, okay, I swear I colored this properly, but some things get missed. Like, it's sometimes hard to tell. So I'm gonna go here. Aha, right here. I couldn't see it in this view, because this is the very basic view, but I was able to see it in the shader view. It's like, okay. Go here. It's not gonna be perfect. We got, like, a tile. So the next thing we can do, we can go up to here, and there's, like, a little eyedropper tool right here. Because, like, I forget. Because, like, sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to, like, kind of go back to this color because I switched it for a second to go do something else. So I'm just going to drop this. That looks terrible. Okay, I'm just going to. So let me know when you've kind of like colored your tile a bit. To look up installing new brushes, because I installed a newer version of Blender and I don't think I got the brushes I had before. I hate that when you like install a program, it's like, oh man, I used to have these brushes, and it's like, now you can't find them anymore. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do, so I'm gonna go take us back to shading. Shortcut to remember is, make sure. Okay. If you hit period on the numpad, it'll basically center your camera on the specific object you're working on, which is really useful if you're like, okay, I'm working on like a couple of different things within one project, and I'm like, oh fuck, I want to just focus on this one little guy. You just hit that period on the numpad, it'll zoom in on that, which is really useful when you're like, oh no. Because if you don't have a numpad, you can change the key binding. Let me see. Yeah. So you go to edit, preferences, key map, and like you're like, okay. They said, oh, it's this one. So I guess let me see what period looks like. Oh, okay. So it'd be like pivot point. You know, like 3D view pivot point. You're like, okay, what is it on my keyboard? I do find it weird, like period on the numpad and period on like the base keyboard are two different things. That's so weird. Okay, anyway, I'm getting distracted. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go here. Oh, wait. We're gonna go to the top right. That's what I was gonna do, and we're gonna hit viewport shading. So you can see what our guy looks like when it's shaded. Yeah, he's a little happy. And I'm like, okay, I kind of want this to look a bit different. I kind of want to move it around a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mapping. What mapping does, it's going to move our little tile texture for us. So let's say I want to like adjust like the scale. I want to make it blown out like this. And I'm like, oh, that does not look good. Why is it black? What? Because it's probably because it's like pulling the texture apart. So let's do like 0.2. That's still too much. Wait, what did I do? I made it even smaller. What am I doing? I'm counting backwards. It's like, kind of messed a little bit. It's like, oh, this doesn't look good. I don't like how the scale looks. I'm just going to keep it regular scale. What I am going to do is I'm just going to change the location of the texture. Like, oh, maybe I want this to appear on the side. So let's go Y. Let's do Y. And I'm just going to move it a little bit. And I'm like, oh, that doesn't look good either. Let me see. I think this may have been the worst one to do with because it's like the texture is very small. Okay, so this is a good lesson. So with a very small texture, moving it around can be a bit more tricky, so you kind of want to know where you're going to start with. If we're looking, let's say we're working with a like a very large wall texture, and you're like, I don't exactly like how this wall texture is either too stretched, too squashed. That's much better than this, which is basically moving the whole texture around. If this was a bigger texture, this wouldn't be that big of an issue. But because it's a small texture, we're getting some issues with, at least what I am. I don't know how it's on your end, with the texture getting separated from, let's say, like a bump map. If I want to give this texture, I would have to have like a layout connecting it to roughness, which is this right here. And roughness just by itself without like a texture can change like what's being picked up on the surface. So right now this is a very simple shape, so like the roughness doesn't change too much when we're like fidgeting with it. So these can be changed. Like the specular, the tint, the clear coat. This right here is called emission. And this right here is if we want to give the tile like a glowy look. So I would go, I'm going to pull him up and I'll make him like a bright yellow. And I'll go like, oh, let's just pull him up here. And he just glows. And I will just lower that back to black. Let me see if there's anything else. Oh, of course, there's something else. So we gone over that. We're gonna go back to layout in the top left of the screen. So we're gonna go back to the camera over here. We're gonna click on the camera. We're like, oh, okay. It's not exactly the most perfect thing, but it looks fine. So we're gonna go X the camera. I'm gonna do this. We're gonna go hit to the UCS, hit X, so we have a right side view. And we're gonna click on the camera. And the next thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna hit G, and I'm gonna move the camera up a bit more. And then we're gonna hit R, and we're gonna rotate that camera down. So when you are looking to rotate something or move something, if you're like, okay, I just want to move it up and down, moving it to a side view is the best way to just get that 90 that you want. Or just that simple, like, not worrying about 3 dimensions in that moment. Because if I was to go, whoop, like, I want to rotate this, R, it's gonna get fucky. It's gonna go wherever the hell it wants to go. Okay, I'm gonna go back into here. Like, oh, almost perfect. We're gonna click on camera. We're just go G. We're just gonna, like, we don't need to go Z or whatever. We're just gonna go up a little bit. And then here, perfect. So the next step is we're gonna go over here to our little toolbar here, and we're gonna hit render. So right now we're an Eevee, which is a very basic sort of like flat way of rendering. We'll just use this for our first render just to show it off. So when you are getting to rendering, right now it's not something we want to get into too much detail, but all these settings have a point to if you want to just tweak like small little things. I'm not super 100% in like the know of like what exactly I need to adjust, I just make sure that I have when I do it, I have transparency on just so the background's transparent. So I don't remember where transparency is in this little window, so I just go up to the search and go trans, and then it goes, okay, it's film I want to go to. I want to hit transparent on film. And then it shows, oh, hey, everything's transparent behind this object. So we're going to X out of that so we can have our window back. And the next thing we're going to do, oh, I'm going to show you this one thing. You don't have to like add anything. I'm just going to show you it. So when you have cameras, right here, there's like a little green, if you go to top right, there's a green little camera. And you're like, oh, what's that mean? Is this going to take me to camera? It's like, no. If you go Shift A, and you're like, oh, I want a second camera. I'm just going to move it over here. Oh, actually, I'm going to, so I actually see something. I'm going to move it over here. There. And I'm like, okay, I want to see what this camera's seeing. I'll go here, click this little guy right here. It shows me, oh, this camera's selected. Boop. There you go. Get a second camera. I'm going to delete that guy because I don't need him. It just, that's one thing that was like really useful to know, because I'm like, oh, I created a second camera because I want a different view. Where's it? How do I get to the second camera? It's just right up there. Right there. Okay, next thing we're going to do. So we're going to go to the top left. We're going to go over here that says render. And then we're going to click render image. And there we go. That's our guy. Not that different than what we see inside of our little window. But I kind of want to give him a bit more flourish. He's looking kind of polygonal right now. So we're going to go back in. We're going to click on him. We're going to go back over to the modifiers. Right here, this little wrench. And I'm like, okay, I kind of want him to look a bit more softer. So I'm going to go render and hit a 3. I'm like, okay. Let's see how this looks now. So we're going to go with this. It's a little bit better. I'm going to pull up to a 4. Okay, that's a lot better. But you still see it right here, like right there. Right there. You can see the little lines making fun of you. So another thing we can do is I right click that guy. And you have shade smooth. And now you can't see. You can't see the little guys right here. And I go, okay, I'm gonna go back to red. And now it's gone. Shade smooth can look a bit weird depending on if you're doing it over a complex object that is more simple in its subdivision. Like I did this well. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to shade smooth. And it looked very, very weird. Because it was basically very light verts, light faces, not a lot of like detail within it. But for something like this is very useful. And I'm like, okay, if that looks good right here, I can drop it down. The render down, probably. Go back here. Yeah. Okay, let me drop it down one more. See how this looks. Okay, so I saved myself some processing power by just doing the shade smooth. Sometimes shade smooth doesn't work great, but there's other times where it does, and it's like a very like important. So it's a right click. You got shade smooth there. You have a bunch of other like little shortcuts that are available in this like little window. We're probably not gonna get into a lot of them. We're probably not gonna get into them right now, but they are very useful. So next thing we're gonna do, it's like, oh, we got this taken care of. We're probably not gonna do more. We're gonna go over here to the subdivision, and there's a little drop down arrow. And we're gonna hit apply. Okay, so with apply added, we're like, okay, so if I want to make any other changes, it's now within the context of this is a more complex shape. So there's other things we can do to this right now, but also you should also know is that when you are working with an object, sometimes order at which you like modify it can change the outlook of it. Like sometimes if you're doing like a lot of modifiers, you haven't applied like the subdivide or some other thing to it, it can look a bit weird, but sometimes sometimes it's just like a massaging. It's not like a science depending on what you're doing. So I'm like, okay, subdivide surface looks good. I'm gonna see what bevel looks like. So bevel, oh buddy, bevel is kind of let me pull this back here because it's kind of hard to see. So our little guy looks a bit, it's coming up at an angle. I'm gonna go like, okay, I kind of want it to be pulled in a bit more, so I'm gonna hit bevel. So what bevel does is kind of adds a smoothing to this edge. And I'm like, okay, what would that look like if I decided to bevel while still subdividing? So I'm gonna go back. So like, okay, let's see what that looks like. So we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna do bevel. Okay, having this and bevel actually look pretty good together. There's different ways. Oh, this one kind of looks weird. Okay, so what I did is instead of edges, where it's beveling along, let me show you this guy right here. I do verts, which then it starts to take these guys into account when it's beveling. So that's why it's creating like this almost kind of jaggedy sort of funky edge to it. So I will apply that, and then I'll apply that. And that's done. Now we did that bevel. Let me know when you're back up here in the render on the right side of the screen in this render menu. We're gonna hit cycles. Oh, okay. Before we hit cycles, we're gonna go back to the very simple shading, because you have to be careful when hitting, like you switch over the cycles and being in the most complex menu. So we're gonna stay here, and we're gonna go, okay, we're going to cycles. Cycles by default picks your CPU as its like rendering option. For me, I can go GPU with no issue. I'm like, okay, so I have like some basic settings. This one right here is very unnecessary. 4096 is way unnecessary. So I'm going to drop that down to 250. Because if I hit 4000 whatever, we're going to be here for a very long time. So that's okay. That is the one difference between 2.9 and 3.6. Is cycles wasn't added in yet. It was still in development. Okay. So you don't need to worry about cycles right now. You can just like watch what I'm doing. It's like a way to kind of learn. Okay. So for like over 4000, that's going to take way too long, even if this is a very complex, simple shape. So I'm just 250. And then I'm going to hit denoise, which when you do cycles, there's going to be like almost this film grain as it's rendering over. So I'm going to hit render. We're going to render this. You see right here. At the very top, you can see it's going through the samples, which is how long it's gonna take to basically render this boy out. So it's not, because this is a very simple shape, it doesn't look that different than just Eevee. Say if I was doing something like this with a bunch of like complex textures, it looks very different than this, which is like Eevee and simple textures. So like if you're doing something simple, you don't need to do something like this. And I believe with that, the only thing you have left to do is just file and save your tile. Let's say save. And now you have like a tile.